Okay, welcome everyone to Weekend Wind Down. I'm business coach Nancy. I'm here every week, mostly speaking to guests about how to help you grow your business. Just give me a second. I want to make sure that we are live. I have way too many screens open. Give me a second. Let's see if I can refresh my business page. If anyone is here watching, just give me a yes, you can hear me and see me so that we know. You're a little last minute here. But anyway, welcome to Weekend Wind Down. Cheers, Martin. Are you able to drink anything but size? Sounds like you're in a coffee shop, right?
I'm in a coffee shop. I have to drive after this. I wish I were drinking wine with you. We have wonderful wines here in BC, and I wish I were enjoying them. So I'm drinking wine and spirits.
Okay, good. All right. Well, cheers. I'm going to take a sip. Welcome, everyone. As you come on, again, you guys mostly know me. I'm Nancy Ganzikoffer, business coach to interior designers and other creative entrepreneurs and certified body language trainer. And I just want to say, if you are struggling to grow your creative business, get on my calendar. You go to my website, nancyganzikoffer.com, and sign up for an initial consultation. Often that's all we need to get you moving forward. It's my specialty. So I am excited today to welcome my guest, Martin Knowles. Martin, I'm going to have you tell a little bit about yourself. However, you are the owner and photographer of Martin Knowles Photo Media. And we had a quick chat before we went live. And you have so many exciting things to share with people today. And I think it's really important because we're going to be talking about how to use photography to get published and what you need to consider. And tell them a little bit about you and how you got started in this. And then we'll get right into teaching everybody what you have to share today.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Nancy. I'm Martin, and I've been running my own small business doing architectural photography here in Vancouver, BC, Canada, for just a little over 12 years now. And I got into this because I was basically pursuing photography as a thing to keep me sane while I was doing software user interface design and other sorts of things. Realized that the things that I was enjoying photographing the most were in and around the built environment, interiors, exteriors, all of that. I didn't even realize when I started that this was a thing that people did. And once I found that out, then it became a real passion of mine. I started to learn more about architecture, interior design, how the built environment is put together, and really how best to portray it and how to communicate about it. So I've ended up working with some really wonderful people and some really great clients, both photographing their projects and also using that photography to help them communicate about their designs, win awards, get published, grow their business through that.
Win awards and get published. Isn't that what every interior designer, architect, contractor really wants? Because that's basically free publicity.
Absolutely. And in fact, not only is it free publicity, but it is actually better publicity than you could even pay for if you could, because when you are winning awards and when you're in print, that's not just you talking about how great your design is, but that's also getting other people to talk about how great your design is. And all of that will help you get your next project, as well as help you talk about the projects that you've already done.
Okay, so how many years have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for a dozen years now. As a full-time profession, I was working part-time for quite a while before that. This is one of those things that actually makes a lot more sense to do as a professional capacity, because you get much better access to things. You end up also being able to get photos that you just wouldn't be able to get any other way. And you get to work with some really wonderful people and share that creative spirit that we all love. Photographers vary a lot in how they want to work with people. Some folks will basically want you to walk through them, and then you leave, and we go and do what we need to do. I am not that. When you are working with me, I welcome that sort of creative collaboration, because ideally, your photography is a strong part of how you want your work to be shown off to the world. Because often, once you finish your project, it takes on a life of its own. And that life of its own is a life that you don't necessarily have full control over. And so it's often the case that photo day is your first, last, and best chance to get everything looking the way that you want it to look for posterity. And later on down the line, somebody may be renovated and might go looking back into the photos that were taken to see how it was supposed to be, as opposed to the way that it was when they got it. And that's a historical function that we photographers have that a lot of people forget about. And we see that a lot with people who are doing renovation projects. They'll go back to previous images that were done 20 odd years ago and go, wow, we should go back to that. Or, yeah, we should build on that.
Yes. And all right, let me say hello to a couple of people. So hello, Marie, Giovanna, Sarah, and Leah, welcome, and Sue Ellen. Make sure you say hello to us. If you have any questions as we go on in our conversation, please don't hesitate to ask them. We will try to get to everyone before the end of the hour. But I'm excited because in the pre-conversation that I had with Martin, which was literally, 5 minutes? You talked a lot about how they need to think about planning for great photography and planning where it's going to be used, and having a well thought out process when it comes to this. And I don't think I've ever talked about that on the show before. So I know you have a slideshow to share that I can share. You want to start with that?
I'll start in, and if you can be ready to have my slides up a little bit later, that would be great.
Okay. They're ready to go up whenever we're ready.
Sounds good. Yeah. So as Nancy mentioned, when you are considering having a project photographed, and we recommend, of course, that you make that consideration fairly early, there are a number of things that you need to have in mind in order to make sure that you get the best results. Every project that you do has a story, and that story can be something that either was sort of overall design brief for the genesis of your project. Things that might have happened along the way might go into it. The story of your project might well be how you made something work that somebody else said could not be done, and those are really always the best.
Yes.
And once you have your story, then that really drives a lot of the other decisions that you make when it comes to choosing photography, choosing where you want to have things published, what awards you want to go into, and all of that. Because if your story, say, has an audience that is more trade focused, let's say that you were working on an interior where everything was local and sustainable and made by people in your community, that's going to attract a different sort of person than a story about how you did something high-end using all name brand components and renovated a multi-million-dollar house, or did an absolutely stunning commercial interior for an internet startup. Those three stories have three different audiences.
Yes.
And the story that you want to tell also depends on who you want to tell that story to, because some media outlets sort of want to see the whole general design world. Some media outlets specialize in certain things, and others, particularly in the world of awards, they have very, very specific requirements for what they want you to fulfill, both in your photography and in the other things that you submit to them. And so you want to pay attention to how your project is or is not a fit for the places that you want it to go.
So, for example, I'm an executive board member of the Interior Design Society, national organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also the president of the virtual chapter. And every year, the national organization has what we call the DODI Awards, the Designer of the Year Awards. And there's all different categories. And one of the things we try to tell our members, and if you're not a member of the IDS, look into it because it's a wonderful organization, is to look, sign into the portal and look into the criteria right from the beginning, because you need to have the clients sign off. You're going to need to have the photographers sign off. And like you're saying, the story behind the transformation is really key in the judging process, besides beautiful design. So how do designers plan at the beginning of every job? I mean, I know I sell contract templates, and I know we put that in there that they would have the rights to photo the job at the end of the job. But what other things should designers do to make sure that they are in touch with the story right from the beginning and not waiting the 6 months to a year to then try to backtrack and remember everything that went through their heads at the time?
Yeah, there's a number of ways that we recommend doing that. One of them is to take notes someplace so that when things happen along the way, you don't forget them. As interior designers, you have all of these little bits and pieces coming in 99 different directions, and things get lost. And you will remember the highlights, but you might not remember that frustrating night where you finally had that aha moment that really made your project the way that it is. Thankfully, you don't have to do that alone, because we work typically in large teams, and as such, you have other people who also had a hand in your project, and we always recommend getting them involved as well. So if you're working, say, with a contractor or with your work or a lighting supplier, a material supplier, etc., they are as much a part of making your work look good as you are, and they may have considerations that you would have either forgotten about or never knew of to begin with. That also ultimately saves you money, because you're not the only one who can use the images that your photographer produces at the end of it all. Contractors, suppliers, etc. need photos too. And if you can share the cost of your photography with lots of folks on your job, then everybody wins. It also
That's a great point.
You also get some great details that you would otherwise miss, and we would otherwise miss, simply because they weren't pointed out. So if there are things that are sort of hidden or out of the way or whatnot, make sure your photographer knows that those are there. We had a wonderful project some while back where somebody had built in a drawer in a wall unit that had an open bottom on it with heating underneath to dry your muddy boots. We're up here in Vancouver, it rains a lot, and that was a feature that had they not made mention of it, it would have been hidden and we would have just never known. So if there are things like that in your project, make sure that you know and that your photographer knows, so that we can show those and you can tell those stories.
Okay, wait, I need to go back to that, because you're saying, okay, it's almost like you're saying, I'm going to put it in layman's terms, because I'm not a designer, I'm a business coach, right? But I understand obviously a lot about the design industry. I've been in it for 20 something years. We'll forget how many years. But so you're saying almost like keep a journal along the way of all the little nuances and decisions that may be unique. Like when they opened up a wall, something behind it was a big problem and you had to come up with a solution along with the contractor or the cabinetry guy. And that part of the story, then you make sure, do you take pictures along the way? I guess that's my point. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's on your iPhone, you just take pictures. Let's talk about iPhone photos for at least along the way stuff.
Yeah, we recommend that people actually take photos on site through the entire process. We do construction progress photography as one of the things that we do, but if there are particular things along the way that might turn into an interesting photo later on, by all means, pull out your phone, photograph them. And show your photographer those photos, because at least I promise not to judge. And if you have a favorite little corner, then chances are I'm going to want to work with that favorite little corner and help you make that favorite little corner look as good as it can be.
Okay. And part of the reason why your firm likes the story along the way, because you're not just the photographer. You help them create the story about the job that they then can submit for contests and for publishing opportunities.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's a great idea. I feel like a lot of the photographers that people hire, and it's just from what my clients have told me, they're just a photographer. And then the designer is left to try to figure out, okay, besides putting it up on their website and Instagram and Facebook and all those, maybe Pinterest, those standard places, a landscaper, of course, just pulled up outside. Can you hear that?
I can't, but I'm in a noisy place.
I know you're I hope everyone can hear us. We're both having some noise in the background. So your company gets called at what point? And follow-up question, if you're not the one taking the photos, but another professional photographer is, do you work with clients like that as well?
Yes. We get called in typically at the start and near the end or at the end, typically at or just after occupancy, once everything is all in and before things have a chance to be moved around and whatever. So we'll get to see things either at the very start for before photos, or most often afterwards, where things are typically looking their best. We also can definitely work with other people's photography work. It's often the case that when we're doing awards entries for people, they'll have a number of really good images, but it won't be quite enough for whatever the category is that they're wanting to put in. So, for instance, somebody will have a set of photos of a house. They'll want to go into a kitchen category. The kitchen will require 8 images on its own. They only had 3. And so we'll get to come right back in and photograph either the whole kitchen or basically fill in the gaps. And we end up doing that with local projects actually fairly frequently.
Okay, so I just want to recap a little bit, because there really is so much we're talking about here, and there's so many nuances. So number one, in the beginning, make sure you have your client's permission to photo when the job is completed, and possibly all along the way. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then take pictures of everything along the way. Mm-hmm. Even if it's on your iPhone, and not just the general space, but specific areas that have a known story of difficulty, perhaps, or a story of transformation that is specific to that client. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what I had mentioned is also look at some publications and some competitions you may want to submit in the future, and make sure you look at all the criteria. Mm-hmm. So that you're photographing as many items as you need to for those categories. And then make sure you're journaling along the way so that you remember all the nuances and all the issues that not only you have had to solve, but maybe your contractors or your industry partners have had challenges to solve as well.
Yeah. Now, here's where in the process things get interesting, because you have this massive pile of knowledge that you've acquired over the course of your project. You might be really excited about that and about sharing it, but for awards entries and for magazine articles, you typically only have 350 to 550 words. And so when you are putting together a story pitch, or you're working with a journalist, or you're putting together an awards entry, you're just not going to be able to fit all of that knowledge in. And so you want to be aware, and you should be at that point in your project, sort of what's most important and what isn't, so that that can make it out. And don't be afraid to edit and cut. I know it's a hard process.
It is.
We always have problems cutting things because we'll be putting in an awards entry and we want to include our favorite photos, and the client wants to include their favorite photos, but they're not necessarily the photos that will fit in best for the 8 images that you get in your entry. And that's always a tough process, and just know that it's going to be that way.
So if someone came to you and said, I'm going to assume they're outside of your area of where you can drive and take the photos yourself. But if somebody came to you and said, I want to put in a kitchen in the Designer of the Year Awards for the Interior Design Society, can you help me put that entry together? Is that something you do?
That is something that we can do. We generally prefer, if you're sort of not in our general area, to hand that off to somebody who is in your general area, because a lot of things that tend to pop up into people's awards entries are sort of local knowledge. And we're happy to do it for folks around here. But when it comes to doing that sort of type PR work, we find that a lot of that is much better done in person. And that takes somebody who is near you or who can be near you to really do effectively. So we can do it. But if you're not around here, we recommend handing that off.
Okay, I got that.
Yeah, there are lots of folks around who actually do that. There are people around who actually specialize in doing PR for interior designers, and you can find them around.
But you help them formulate the story behind the pictures, and your firm also will take the pictures. Tell everyone again what area of the nation you're in. You're in Vancouver?
Yep, we're in Vancouver. We do a lot of our work pretty much all over BC, which is a very large geographic area for those who know, and then also down into northern Washington. So about as far south normally as Seattle. We do occasionally make it on the road down into Portland and the LA Palm Springs area as well. We'll be down in Palm Springs for Modernism Preview Week another couple of weekends.
I love Palm Springs, and I'll be in Portland on November 1st. I'm doing an Interior Design Society event. I'm a speaker there called Elevate, so I'm actually really
very cool.
I've never been there. I've never been to Portland, so I'm really excited.
It's a great place. Yeah.
I know, everyone's telling me that. So, okay, so take pictures all along the way, have your story, have a journal so you can talk about and remember the things that happened along the way, because you never know what's going to be important in telling that story on your social media or on your website or when you're going for a publication. Is it okay, because this question I get asked a lot. Designers love to, and they're advised to half the time, post pictures all along the way during their process on Instagram or on Facebook to show the progress. If you're looking to have that particular job or home published eventually in a print ad, are you allowed to have had published it all along the way in your social media?
It depends on the publication. Some magazines in particular are tighter than others. Generally speaking, people are fine with having people post construction progress photos on their social media because they know that everybody does it. Where you run into issues is if you have something photographed and then if you're posting your final images on social media, that that magazines in particular really frown on, because if you're going to have something in print, they ideally want to be the first or one of the first to actually break that story in print. And if you've done it on social media, then you deprive them of the ability to do that. Now, having said that, there are often places for teasers and whatnot. So we have clients who will often photograph something on my screen over my shoulder when I'm on site photographing something, and they'll post that on social media with a thing of, nifty project all done, professional photos coming soon. Instagram stories can also work really well for this because they only hang around for 24 hours or so.
Yes.
So if you are wanting to get something out, Instagram stories can be a good way to do it. If you have a particular publication that you want to go into, chat with them first and see what their editorial stance is on that. If they don't have one, and if they don't have any advice for you, post away. If they do, follow what they tell you.
Okay, now when you say chat with them first, how? People are like, well, what do I do? Just call up the editor? Like, how? It takes a lot of guts, it feels like, for an interior designer to pick up the phone to a magazine that publishes interiors and say, what's your criteria for publishing? What is the best way for them to find out what they're looking for?
Your best way is usually to look at the website of the publication that you're looking for. A lot of design media outlets put that information up on their website somewhere, and you may have to search a little bit for it. So if they have a section on, how to submit a project, look at that. So a lot of editors are actually far better on email than they are by phone. If you're feeling shy, is a good thing. Your email may go off to somebody else, but if you look at particularly a print copy of the magazine, and there's an email in their masthead, which is the part of the magazine that lists out all of the people who are responsible for it. It's normally in the first 4 or 5 pages. You typically flip right through it. Flip right through it this time. Look at that. If there are emails and contact info in there, that information is there because they want you to use it.
Okay. So most of the time, you think they answer?
A lot of times they do. The other thing to look at is if they have an editorial calendar online. And typically this gets pitched more towards advertisers, but that basically tells you what they are planning to do as sort of overall issue focuses. So they might have, say, an interiors issue, they might have a commercial issue, they might have a summer outdoor living issue, etc. See if you can find that on their website and see if that's a match for your project.
Okay. Another question popped into my head and it popped right out again. So if anyone has questions, we've got Martin here to answer questions about photography of your jobs, planning for publication, planning for design competitions. So ask away. Now's your opportunity. Shall we share your slideshow at this point?
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can get that going. I don't know if I'm yelling, if people think I'm yelling because I have so much noise in the background. It's crazy. But okay, let me change the way our screen is to make that a little bigger. Okay.
There we go. So one of the things that we end up having a lot of people, particularly in our local market, because we're in a city, run into, is there are sort of 3 general approaches to photographing interiors and other architectural subjects. There's sort of the real estate approach. There's the architectural and interiors approach, and then there's the lifestyle approach. And different awards programs and different magazines tend to favor one approach over another. So if you are wanting to put things in, say, for a magazine like Wallpaper or Dwell, they're going to want more of a lifestyle focus. Whereas if you have a local high-end real estate magazine or if you're wanting, if your project is targeting a particular high-end demographic and your project is being sold. So if you're going into, say, your local airplane magazine, then they're going to be more partial to the sort of real estate approach. And when you are working with an architectural photographer, you want to make sure that the approach that they take and the approach that you ask for matches what you are getting. So if I can have the next slide there, Nancy, please.
Is it showing?
Yeah, it's showing. Great. So real estate is sort of the fast and cheap side of the Venn diagram. You know, you can have good, fast, or cheap. Choose any two. Real estate is the quick and cheap side of things, because real estate is really designed so that people can get stuff up onto MLS, and so that people can actually get into that project and see it in person. So if we look at the next slide, it's doing a little bit of arranging and staging, but real estate is typically spending no more than about an hour or so in your project. And the assumption is that you're going to actually see that project in person anyway. So if you go on to the next slide. So while things can be moved around, it's not really paying any attention to individual details. And if you're doing multifamily work that's already pretty well staged, real estate can actually work out pretty well for you. And if it's a project that wouldn't necessarily be photographed any other way, real estate is actually a lot better than nothing, because you will get a record of your project. But in a lot of cases, particularly for magazine and awards work, you want to be one step up. So if you look at the next slide, and the next slide, what you're going to really generally want to be doing is having somebody who will take more of an architectural and interiors focus, because this approach effectively is more about communicating about your design and really telling the story that you want to tell, as opposed to just seeing it as a place that's for sale. So as a result, next slide, even for the same space, it takes a very different and often a lot closer approach, so that you really see what is special about the project. And often what you spent most of your work on will tend to show up best with this approach, whereas it might not with a real estate approach. Next slide.
Okay, but I have to ask you, is this photoshopped in these windows, or is that actually the view?
That is actually the view. This approach does Photoshop things into windows because of timing and technical limitations. That one's actually real.
I love that.
That was very carefully timed to have that approach.
Yes, I could see that.
Yes. You also end up with a lot of the sort of really strong, nice one-point perspectives that a lot of the design press really loves, and that will also highlight nicely on your website. You also get much higher quality output. So if you zoomed in on a little area of that, ideally, you would still get an image that would work just fine for your social media, or might be a little sidebar in print.
So it looks like you spent the entire day at this photo shoot, because you have daylight and you have evening.
That is pretty much correct. This approach does take longer. This was about 3/4 of a day. But real estate would not generally do that. You would get 2 quick visits at best.
Exactly.
The architect and I meticulously placed things, and we were actually working together. I shoot everything directly onto my laptop, so that you see how things are going to be coming together in the final image. And if there are things that may look right by your eye, those may not necessarily look right by the camera's view for a number of reasons. And so we can work through that as a creative collaboration and make sure that that's going to show in your photos as well as it can possibly show.
Very cool. Okay.
And you'll notice the earlier version of this image had a bunch of extra furniture on that. A lot of time on site in this approach gets spent moving and removing furniture and other things around so that your eye is drawn through that space.
Yeah, I mean, these little nuances make a huge difference, right? Staging. How do you prepare to, how should the designer prepare to stage the space so that they get amazing photos every single time? Is it a matter of bring extra stuff, try it, take it away, and playing around with it constantly?
It depends on the space. That approach works really well. For places that have already been lived in for a while, typically less is more. And you want to make sure that things are as cleaned up as they can be. This can often be a really good way of actually getting back into a space. Everybody loves it if somebody else cleans up their space after them. And if you offer to pay for some cleanup, and if it's going to be a really long shoot, pay to give them a nice dinner and whatnot so that you can have access to your house longer. That can be a great way to actually get through. As for staging, we tend to find that it really depends on the project and what story you want to actually get out there. And also what your client's taste in furniture and accessories and whatnot actually is. Some spaces you can just waltz right in and shoot anytime and it'll be perfectly and meticulously staged. And those are wonderful things. We'll of course have to move a few things around because, as we said, the camera doesn't see things the way that you see them. Other times you need to clean up, move things around, add furniture, accessories, etc. And if it's a project that you care a lot about, we usually recommend that you as a designer go in sometime beforehand and take a walk through, chat with the owner, chat with your client, see where those areas are and see what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's many times that a designer does a job they finished 6 months ago, and now they're going, or 3 months ago, and now they're going in to take pictures, and they go in and they're appalled.
Yes, and
now people are actually living there.
Mm-hmm.
And they have messed up the beauty. Okay, let's go on to the bathroom.
Yes. So here, the real estate version, which we sort of blasted right on by, doesn't show much at all. But
did I go by it?
Pardon me?
I don't think I went by anything.
Yeah. Back in the real estate section, there was a photo of this. And here, this was very specifically designed with that mirror and Japanese style faucet for that client, and that got lost in the real estate approach. And it's very clear and very carefully set up so that you can read it here in the interiors approach.
Okay, I understand. So you're showing almost the same pictures in each category and showing how the photography is different based on what you're going for. So if you're looking to sell the house, that was in the real estate section. And now if you're looking for the interiors and the architectural elements, you're changing the way you're photoing it.
Yes.
So when someone wants to hire a photographer and they say they specialize in real estate, they may not necessarily have the eye for this architectural interior photography. They may, but you don't really know that unless they have a proven track record.
That's correct. Yeah. You should not assume that because they are two different approaches. Some people can do both approaches quite well. Some will specify or will specialize in one or the other.
I know when I sold my house, which was a year ago, the real estate agent just came in and took pictures. They were horrible.
Yeah.
And the house didn't end up selling. The next real estate agent had a professional photographer come in.
It makes a difference.
It made a huge difference. The house sold right away.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Now this is now lifestyle as opposed to real estate and architectural and design photography. What's different about lifestyle?
Lifestyle basically looks more at how your space actually gets used with actual people. Now, actual people may be models, they may be people in your firm that you brought along for the shoot, they may be your clients.
Or your kids.
Or your kids, yep, and your pets. The focus here is how people actually could be living ideally in your space. This is a good way to show how your space actually functions as an envelope for living. The caution with this, if you go on to the next page, often if your space, and this is pretty common for retail, has a brand identity, and your brand identity is also in your clothing, this is how you get to show it. Next slide. Sometimes the space just won't read unless you see how it's actually used. This was sort of the ultimate barn that was incredibly well designed, and so you have to show what it's going to be used for. The caution with this is some magazines, and particularly some awards, do not let you do this. And if you are going for a magazine that doesn't like to show people, or an awards program that prevents you from it, then make sure that your photographer also gives you images that are people-free, that are just for space, if you look at the next page, so that you're not limited. So you can basically combine the three approaches, and we recommend that people do, because some parts of your project might lend themselves well to having people in them. Others you want to show your design, and others it's just real estate. We want to have it for records so you don't lose it.
Okay, so like Lindsay Gallo said, she said, so it might be called a media kit. So when you're looking, I love the fact that you're pointing out how there are three different types of photography for interiors and exteriors, that you kind of want to think of every single approach. If you're bringing on a photographer, you want to think, how can I satisfy all three of these approaches? So no matter where and tell the story and do the journaling and take the pictures along the way, because whichever competition you end up joining, or magazine you want to be published in, when you see their criteria, you'll have the right shots. If you don't think of all these different angles, you may be dying to publish in one magazine, but you don't have, let's say, the lifestyle shots. Oh, did we lose Martin? Okay, I might be on my own right now. Can everyone tell me what you're seeing? Because I'm seeing Martin frozen, and and his screen, and me chatting away. All right, Martin, if you can hear me, you can go back out and come back in. Tell me whether any of you watching have ever thought of these three approaches when you have hired a photographer for your jobs. Because honestly, I've never thought of these three types of photos that are key when you're photoing your work. I just always think there's only one kind. You photo the inside. Yep, he's frozen. Martin is frozen. Okay, he has left the broadcast. So let's see if he comes back in. I know he was in a cafe. Martin Frozen. Oh my God, I think that's his new name, Martin Frozen. Oh, here he comes. Hold on, I gotta waiting for his picture to appear in the lobby of Be Live. Okay, it says he's in the lobby, but I don't see his picture, which could end up being a problem. Wendy, thank you. It is a new way of thinking. And Vanessa, yes, definitely incredible information. I think this is huge, actually. I've never thought of any of this. Okay, Martin, I don't know if you can hear me, but we cannot. I know you're in the lobby, but I cannot see you. I'm going to try to bring him back up into the broadcast, and maybe his face will appear. Nope. Okay, Martin, you are not showing. I think he's messaging me through Facebook. Excuse me, everyone. He said, back in a second, lost the net. Yes, we cannot see you. The joys of doing live, everybody. I'm going to bring him back down into the lobby. So I actually think this is really interesting, and I'm going to reiterate some of what Martin has said so far. I know he has more to his slideshow, I think. I don't want to go ahead, but it is incredible information, and it is like Wendy is saying, it's a new way of thinking. When you hire a photographer, if it's not Martin's company, because he's not within your zone, the Washington, D.C., Vancouver area, it's something you want to discuss with your photographer. Okay, he says he should be back, but he's not back. He's messaging me through Facebook. He says he's in the lobby. Not anymore. Try again. Oh, here he comes. Thank you for being patient, everyone. Oh, he's back. Hold on. I'm bringing him back up.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. You're back up. Okay, so glad to have you back. We're getting a lot of comments now because I was sort of reiterating how, well, first of all, everyone said, you're frozen. Martin's frozen, frozen, frozen.
I'm sorry, it's not that cold out here.
So,
furthermore, I have coffee.
That's right. You're not really frozen, but you were frozen on the screen for a while.
Yes, indeed.
And it wasn't an ugly face, so don't worry. So anyway, so yes, Wendy had said it's a whole new way of thinking. Like when you're hiring a photographer, to make your options greater, to think about these three different methods. And Giovanna saying yes, but not usually for the real estate aspect, right? For real estate, it's simpler than
real estate's a run and done sort of pursuit.
Yeah, run and done. Let me just see what everyone else is saying. Sharon, I think the idea of storytelling or journaling throughout the process is also a great way to actively reflect. Definitely, because even guys, when you're doing your website, the storytelling aspect is very key. So someone can, when they come to your website, they can imagine that they were in the shoes of this other client that you have already completed and go, oh my God, that's me. And it helps with your storytelling and with your SEO as well. Susan said, blink twice if you can hear us, Martin. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, what Sharon said is absolutely bang on, because we've actually seen it taken one step further. We have interior designers who will bring us in for photos a good, 6 months, year or so after things are done. Because up here, that's how long it takes for landscaping to grow in. So if exteriors are part of your project, you are kind of often forced into that. And either shoot day or your second visit can be a really good place to do some post-occupancy evaluation, which will make your next design better. So there's that neat little side benefit in there that you get a chance to see how things are actually working out.
Yes.
And have that talk with your client, because by then you will know.
Absolutely. And I think Lindsay's right too. You really need to, what you're saying is, everybody think what Lindsay summarized. You really need to think about what your goals are before you shoot the space and how it's, how the effect and how your space is going to get captured. And if you want to open up to a ton of opportunities, should you want to then go for publications, take every option, right? Why limit yourself when you have the photographer available? Although I know photography is expensive, Martin, and this is a big thing for interior designers.
Yes.
But this is their livelihood at the same time, which is why as a business coach, I go back to, you need to be at a 50 to 60% profitability margin in your business so that you can do what you need to do to continue to grow your business and reach out and attract your ideal client. Those of you who are working at a 20 or 30% profitability and you're afraid to charge too much and all this stuff, this is what it's affecting. It's affecting your ability to hire the experts in order to increase your visibility in other areas. I just had to say that. So if you're still not charging your worth, get on the phone with me because I can't stand that. And my clients who are listening, they'll tell you, I can't stand when you're not charging your worth. So anyway, do we have more slides?
That's pretty much what I wanted to show for this. What Nancy said about the importance of recording your work for building your business is absolutely bang on. And for those of you who came in late, you may have missed it. Often the photos that you have are the most accessible and most portable, and particularly on projects that tend to have a short lifetime, they may be the only images you have that a client can actually visibly see. And so that's really important, because how else are you going to be able to show the work that you can do and the work that you have done?
It's true. It's true. And let me ask you something, because sometimes I recommend my clients do this, and I don't know if it pisses photographers off, so I'm going to ask you. So often they don't have headshots or lifestyle shots for themselves that are very good. So when they tell me they're filming, you know, they've hired a photographer to photo one of their jobs, I'm like, could you like dress up nice, do your hair and makeup, and ask the photographer to take a couple pictures of you while they're there? Is that a bad thing?
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but you should know that photographers have specialties. And the best photographer for doing your headshot is generally not the best photographer for photographing your space, because it's different lighting, it's often different equipment. And while I mean, yeah, I can pop off a perfectly good headshot when you're in your space. If you want a really good headshot, particularly if you are in a city, hire somebody who does weddings, portraits, that sort of stuff, to do your headshot as well.
Yeah, but the lifestyle shots, I mean, you could be the person sitting on that couch.
Yep, absolutely. But that's a different function, because yes, certainly dress up so that you can be that model in there. Being a model in a space is different than being the subject of a headshot.
Yeah, well, you know what? I feel like headshots are sort of out and lifestyle shots are in. So I feel like if you
there's ways to get away with it.
I think you could get, I mean, again, I'm not a photographer. I try to sneak in a little extra when someone's hiring somebody, like just see if you could sit on the couch or sit on a chair and get a couple of shots, because sometimes those are the shots not only will be good for your space, but it'll be good for your website as well, that it's not just a headshot. You know, it's you sitting fully dressed somewhere, and it's appropriate for some spots in your social media or on your website. Maybe not just in one spot, but in other spots.
Yeah, absolutely. We have many photos where a designer or somebody in their office is the one basically sitting there having a coffee or reading the paper or whatever else in the photo. And if that's the look that you're going for in your media, then yeah, absolutely go for it. Ask your photographer that.
Will they be mad? Will they be mad?
No. I'm just saying that they may not necessarily give you the results that you're after if what you are after is a more traditional headshot look.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so Sharon is saying she did that in one of her last projects for an action shot, and really these lifestyle walking.
Yes, totally.
Space, right? The action shots are really what a lot of people are using on their social media now and on their websites. That old traditional just a headshot is kind of getting old school and boring and doesn't stop people from scrolling. Where if you have, you know, some kind of a lifestyle shot, and she heard it on one of Luann's podcasts, which is fabulous. So, okay, so we are coming close to the end of the broadcast here. So you do have more about planning photography here.
That was the last slide in that little chunk. This is actually part of a larger talk that I actually do as a webinar and also as an on-site event. I do a full hour's lunch and learn, which is presently IDC and AIBC, soon to be AIA accredited as well, where I go into all of this in great detail. And I also talk more about issues of how to effectively share the costs of your shoot with your trades and how to make that work best for everybody. Because as Nancy said, photography has a reputation for being expensive, particularly the good stuff, but it doesn't have to be. And if you're smart about it, you can actually end up having really good photography that you share with other people who are involved that is roughly the price of having real estate done and is far better and far closer to your goals.
I love that as a little bit of ending, and I'm going to share your website as well so people know where to find you. But talk a little bit about how you would share the cost.
Different photographers have different ways to do this. So if you're going to do this, talk with your photographer first so that you make sure that everybody is on your page. Talk to your affiliates, associates, your trades, etc. We have a spreadsheet that we send to people just to jog their minds. And if there are other people who are interested in sharing the cost of the shoot, get them in early. If you have that one signature lighting fixture that really makes your dining room, chances are whoever made that lighting fixture probably is going to want images of it as well. And if you let your photographer know that you are doing this and roughly how many people you are sharing with, then it makes our job much easier because we can then shoot to fulfill everybody's requirements and also share the costs of both the shoot and the images in multiple ways.
Okay, so Susan's asking a good question. May I ask then, who owns the photos if they're shared? And I like what you said, ask your photographer first, because it then allows them to price the job properly, knowing how many people will be sharing and how many specialized shots. But who does own the photos if it's being shared? And who has to give credit to whom and when?
When photographers photograph, we own the copyright until we explicitly transfer it. So there's sort of two general ways about this. And I am not a lawyer, so make sure that, since I am not in your jurisdiction, there's a little bit of variance. But generally speaking, most professional photographs, the photographer owns the copyright to, and we license out the ability to use those images, typically for a particular purpose or a particular time. So we can license those images out to lots of different people for various purposes while still holding the copyright. It works a lot like a book or particularly your computer software. When you get yourself a copy of Adobe Photoshop, what you are buying is a license to use Photoshop. Adobe still owns Photoshop. And a lot of professional photography works the same way. Sometimes photographers will actually transfer their copyright to somebody else as part of the process. So particularly for things like construction progress things or for projects that have a particular client, so high-end retail folks, if you're working for, say, Dior or Ted Baker or a really big brand, they will want to own the copyright, and they will want to have control over it. And if you're in that situation, then you get to work it out with them and with your photographer. So yeah, there's basically two ways to work it, and as with everything, be clear with your photographer because licensing is almost always cheaper than owning the images.
Okay, let me just break this down to layman's terms. So I pay $5,000, and I'm just pulling that number out of a hat. I truly have no idea how much it costs. So I pay $5,000 for a photographer to come in and photo a residence that I have been the designer, but I've split the cost with the window treatment person, perhaps the lighting company, and the cabinetry guy. Mm-hmm. And I pay you to come and take the photos, and you provide me with whatever it is, 20 images. then those 20 images, I can't just give them away because you still own the rights to them, the copyright. If I'm going to give it away to these other companies to use on their social media, on their website, or to do whatever they want, I don't have the right to do that just because they paid for part of the 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I am sharing the cost with these other 3 people, and they would also like the rights to use certain images. And you have to be able to price that accordingly and give the criteria of how they can use it, like possibly giving your company credit for taking the photos or for owning the rights to the photos or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And that's how everything gets kept fair and legal and all of that.
Okay. So like you said, we're not lawyers. So
But I'm your photographer.
You're a photographer. I'm a business coach. And this was a very interesting conversation, Martin. I thank you for coming on. And for anyone who wants to find you, I'm looking up because I have like the space station here, as everyone who knows, who watches me often. So your site is mkphotomedia.com.
That's correct.
If they want to reach out to you, make sure that you go in after this broadcast to my business page, Nancy Genzenkofer Business Coach, and put your contact information. If it's just your website, that's awesome. And how they can connect with you if they have any more questions or they need you for one of their jobs. I would love you to get some work from this. You're a great guy.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be on. This has been fun. You really gave a ton of information, and I appreciate it. And when you come out with webinars that people can learn from, make sure you're in my private Facebook group, the Interior Design Business Forum. If anyone who's watching on replay or live is not in there yet, get in there, because it's an abundance of support of everyone exchanging information that's helping them grow their businesses and getting clarity for where they might not be clear. So I'd love to have you in that group when people have questions about photography and the way to go and getting published and submitting for design competitions. You're really a wealth of knowledge. Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to share. So I am in that group, and I'll see you there.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. This is Weekend Wind Down with Business Coach Nancy. If you need me, you know where to find me in the group, Interior Design Business Forum, or hop onto my website. Don't be sitting there making less money than you deserve. It's a pet peeve of mine. Get on my calendar for a consultation, and let's get you making the money you're supposed to be making. So talk to you guys soon. Bye, everyone.
See you all.